wanted to spend a little time and share with you some considerations and discuss some of the issues that will be involved in our churches recovering and re-engaging in community and church services after the governmental restrictions are lifted from the COVID-19 or the coronavirus that we've all been experiencing. One of the things that's been obvious to me as I interacted with different people around the world is that this is a universal issue dealing with this virus. I find myself wondering if this is a good opportunity to talk about another universal problem, that is the problem of sin. But that's a discussion for another time. What we want to talk about now, at least in North America, the discussion among the politicians and the government authorities is increasingly about re-engaging with society, restarting businesses, and starting to allow larger groups to meet. And so that has direct implications for us as churches, since many of us have gone to online fellowship, online services. But there's coming a time shortly, for some it's already here, of going back to things as they were, so to speak. But we all recognize things just can't go back to what was normal. It'll be a new kind of normal. So we've got 6 of us here. They're all part of Biblical Eldership Resources, and I just want to introduce them to you to begin with. First of all, we got Alex Strauch. Alex, why don't you give an indication so that everybody knows who you are?
I'm right here, Chuck. I hope you can see me.
There you go. All right, Alex, of course, is the author of Biblical Eldership and a number of other works. Then we have Bob Deffinbaugh, who's has a significant contribution through the work of Bible.org. So you saw Bob waving his hands. Then we got Viji Roberts from Toronto, Ontario. Viji?
Yeah.
Viji's involved quite a bit up there in international ministries as well. Dave Anderson. Dave? Good to have you on board, Dave. And Dave is involved as a teaching elder at Littleton Bible Chapel in Colorado. And then Kevin Fitzgerald, who's a former missionary in South Africa and currently in full-time ministry in Fenton's Crossing in Missouri. So that's our discussion group today. And I want to start it off by asking the question, first of all, before we talk about what's coming next, is how would you guys describe the experience of your churches being substantially online meetings? Have there been any benefits, shortcomings to this? Bob, why don't you start us off there? What's your assessment?
I don't think anybody feels that the online experience is equal to or superior to what we've been doing. But I think the thing that sets us apart is our commitment to the Lord's Supper and to a church meeting where there is a diversity of participation. When you have a top-down system where you've got the senior pastor and sort of single person, that adapts well to a camera, whether you have an audience or not. But for us, the whole issue of a body being able to be together and interact together is pretty unique for us. And consequently, I think we sacrifice by not being together.
I agree with what Bob said. There's a lot to lament, but I think so much to be thankful for. We think of the fact that we can, there's social media, we can email, we can call. The body life suffers a lot, but praise the Lord, there's still a lot we can do in terms of just, loving our members and keeping in contact. And obviously it's not the same, but I praise God that, for what we can do, certainly.
Two things come to mind. One is, I think there are more people attending our prayer meetings now. And we've always been praying about more people to attend, more people would attend prayer. And for whatever reason, it's probably during the week and people are not able to get out, but now they can do that online. The second thing that really comes to mind is people are eager to come back and assemble together. There is this pain I can see in people's expression. that they are just waiting to come back and meet up together, reassemble.
Why do you, going back to your first comment, why do you think there's more people attending the online prayer meetings?
I would like to say that it's because there is a stirring of their heart. I don't know at this point, but I think there's also ease of access. Maybe that's what's causing, and I'm hoping it's the former.
I wonder if there's the desire for community, because being isolated, at least in North America, where people are encouraged to hunker down in their homes and the social distancing rules in place, that people are hungering, even if it's online, to connect with people. What do you?
This is a funny thing, right? I mean, when it started, people thought it's a great thing for the introverts. I'm an introvert. My wife is an extrovert, and everybody was like, "How is Joyce coping with all this? You know, not able to meet people." And they thought that I should be in like third heaven or whatever. But you know, it doesn't work for either. The extroverts want to meet people and they're not able to. The introverts want space, but you're in each other's face because you're isolated. It doesn't work for both. So I guess whether you're an extrovert or an introvert, you're just seeking to meet people now.
Kevin, what's your experience been like there in Missouri?
Well, we agree with Bob. There's nothing like face-to-face contact and being together, but there has been a couple of silver linings. You know, we're here in Missouri, and in the winter, we probably canceled church 2 or 3 times because of snow and ice, and now it's like we're never going to cancel again. So when there's snow and ice, we're just going to do our Zoom. We've also agreed that, you know, we have shut-ins and elderly who sometimes can't come on Sunday. And so we're going to, when we do get back together, we're going to have a regular Zoom for those who can't come. I agree with Viji. We have had an uptick in people participating. Our midweek Bible study is going strong. We've had more people come out for prayer. And then finally, and this is one we didn't see coming, our assembly is about 20 years old, and over the years, many people have moved away because of schooling or jobs, and a handful have come and joined us on Sunday morning, so it's really a blessing to see folks we haven't seen for a while. So there are some silver linings.
Alex, you've been involved in a startup church, effectively. How has that experience been with a smaller group, maybe less resources for the technology? And
Well, I want to just go along with what was said here. You lose the energy of the music, the singing together, that you can't duplicate, even if you try it online. And there's something about the synergy of when people are together and you're just interacting with each other. And that cannot be duplicated by online means. But it's, as has been said, it's the best we can do right now. We don't do videoing. We don't have the equipment for it, but we just put everything out online. And then what we've been doing a little differently is after the sermon, 2 of the elders will interact with the preacher and ask questions. And people seem to really like that. The Q&A time, put the preacher on the furnace and heat it up a little bit. Ask him, what did he mean by that? And does he have any proof for that? And so people like that. So I would say it's a good substitute, but it's not the real thing. But I always have felt, boy, if you could have some interaction, can you be more specific? Can you apply that? People like that. Get their questions answered. And if they had napped during the sermon, they weren't paying attention, they can always ask the person, could you repeat that again?
You know, Chuck, I forgot to tell you one thing. One of the benefits of Zoom that I had never thought of in a million years is, you mentioned I was a missionary in South America, in Ecuador, and the assembly down there are all on Zoom, very technical, and they contacted me and asked me to preach there. So without having to pay an airfare and leave my home, I was able to preach in the assembly in Quito right from my kitchen here in St. Louis.
Let's turn things a little more practical now. In terms of the post-restriction life of the church, what are some key things to consider as we transition back away from online only to having face-to-face group meetings, church like normal? But Bob, why don't you kind of give us a few things that you think rise to the surface?
A couple of things are concerning to me. One of them is a degree of sort of conspiracy theories that are going on in the church. The government's trying to control us, and the high degree of polarization of people who feel strongly about not being put off to online services, and other people who are very vulnerable, who will come if you open the doors. So one of the things I think is important is, rather than thinking about my rights, which I hear a lot of, especially in the secular realm, I'm thinking in terms of 1 Corinthians 8 and through 10, where Paul is saying, you may say that you have the right to eat meats offered to idols, but the question is not your right, it's how does this affect your brother? And so I think Christians really need to be in Philippians 2, 1 Corinthians 8 through 10, where they're saying, my concern is to act out of love so that I don't cause harm to a brother. So for us as elders to say we're going to meet, it is for some elderly, vulnerable people, they're going to be in that door, and our decision may end up in their demise. And so we really have to be careful that we're not just thinking about how is this for me, but how is this going to impact other people?
Yeah, I mean, we're going to follow, the guidelines as they roll out, and maybe it's going to be different in different areas. One of the things I know we're thinking of for the Lord's Supper, when we can do that, is just to have stations. Maybe we'd have bread pre-cut into cubes, juice in individual cups and trash cans, just to keep people apart. One of the things we've talked about is if we can do 10 or less, gather 10 or less, we would encourage visitations to some degree. If it's 25 or less, we would open up youth group and maybe some home groups. If it's 50 or less, we would have some form of the Lord's Supper or cycles of the Lord's Supper. I noticed today the Denver diocese has allowed the Catholic Church to do mass, like sidewalk mass. So there's things like that we're just kind of pondering and thinking about.
You have to consider our seniors and those who are very vulnerable. My wife is one of those because she has Crohn's disease. The doctor has actually called her twice to make sure no one's in our home, because the doctor said she would not survive this a week. So I have to consider, we have set June 7th to meet together as a church, but as we meet, we're going to have to take some very clear cautions. Cautious, but not fearful is what they normally say. So she probably will not come on the 7th, or if she has to sit in a different area, because I don't want to lose my wife. And we already know one person in Littleton Bible Chapel who has died of this, and others of you know someone who's died of this. So it's not a joke. Some of those who are younger and stronger, of course, they don't think it could ever happen to them. So it's really, in many ways, our vulnerable ones that we want to really provide for them safety.
Boy, that gives substance and traction to the idea that one of you guys had said about having a Zoom meeting even after things are let loose, for the sake of those that can't come because of health issues or a variety of things, which could, for some churches, could launch them into a new level of technology. It's really not that difficult to set up a camera and feed it into Zoom, and then people can have access to a live meeting. So that's, it's surprising how simple it is nowadays. You can, even with a good smartphone, you can create a very good video image that can then be live streamed. You just get some young person that likes technology, and they'll figure it out and they'll love to do it.
You know, Chuck, this is not going to just be over on June 7th. Every expert says this is going to go on for quite a while, and it will go through stages. So it's not going to be like one Sunday, oh, everything's changed and different. It's not going to be that way. It's something we ease into. It's something we keep adjusting to as we see the needs or problems that our people are facing.
Yeah. What about social distancing? How are you going to handle that as you move back? Just because the government relaxes those restrictions, does that mean we can go back to our holy hugs and the holy handshakes and stuff? How do you deal with all that?
We have to ease back into this. We'll probably do elbows, ask people not to hug. Again, a person may seem very healthy, but asymptomatic and be actually spreading it. If you're talking to someone, use a mask. Before we had to not meet, we did all of our refreshments and pre-wrapped things. So there are things you can do to ease into this and be watching it all the time and adjusting to it. But here's something very important. It's so important that the leaders of the church are really communicating to the people when you're going to meet, some of the conditions you're asking for. Be very clear. People are looking for that right now. Tell them some of the things you're going to do. Some people need to be called and maybe asked not to come right yet for now. So be in front of this thing, not in back of it. Be leading the church, be guiding the church. Tell them where you're going with this. I know the people are looking for this.
Veggie.
So as leadership, we met a couple of weeks ago on Zoom to talk about what we would do when we come back. And we identified 4 areas. One is feeding. So how do we feed the flock? Feeding and fruitfulness. The second was fellowship. The third was fishing, because outreach and missions we wanted to consider. And then the fourth was the facilities. And the discussion from facilities was that, simple things as keeping the main door open, main door to the sanctuary would not be closed, but kept open so people can come in and out. When they come in.
Without having to hold the handles or anything like that, you mean?
Yeah. That's correct. Yes.
Bathroom doors are another commonly used.
Bathroom doors will be kept open, and getting in. There are 4 things that we identified that they could do in the washroom. First of all, you get in, one person at a time, or if our washrooms are small, that's why it's one person at a time. And about wiping down after you finish, washing your hands, and making sure the lights and the doors are left open so that the next person does not have to touch them. Even the seating, we would do cluster seating, so families can sit together. But we recognize too, some of them have already said they won't be coming in till maybe the vaccination has come out.
One simple practice I heard on a trip once, somebody interrupted me, a total stranger. I was in the washroom ready to walk out and grab the handle. He says, oh, let me go first. And he grabbed a paper towel and used that on the handle. And I thought at the time, this is about 20 years ago. It seemed a little strange to me, but I've always remembered that. And even now, to be able to teach your congregation, just be able to mention if you have a paper towel, use that when you come out, and then make sure the trash can is located right by the door. Simple things like that. Vigi, what are those? There was 4 F's. What are those again?
One is feeding. How do we continue to feed the congregation? In that we spoke about the service format. We said we're going to take away the break in between. We will just crunch in, so the service just goes straight for 90 minutes. The bigger question was also re-engagement, because right now the level of engagement has dropped. What I meant by engagement is interaction, and when they come back, how do we re-engage them? So our service would include testimonies and those kind of things. Then the fellowship. We We spoke, I think, communion as part of that, like what Dave was talking about. There'll be no coffee breaks, at least till such time that we can be a little more, we are safe.
Your service was normally two parts. You'd have the first part, then there was a break, and then a second part, right? Okay, so you're talking about maybe squeezing out that middle part.
That's correct. That's correct.
For other churches, it might be squeezing out the end. Like our church has usually about a half-hour fellowship afterwards. People just don't want to leave. That's when we chat and we talk and interact. So that could be affected. Okay. So the first one was feeding, and then there was fellowship, and then what was the third one?
Third was fishing, which has to do with missions and outreach. And the fourth was facilities and fixtures.
How do you see the fishing will change?
I think the leadership's biggest concern was how we become very inward focused in these past 1 month. And that was also because we were trying to figure out how to manage things and, manage people, their emotional and spiritual needs. But we know this cannot continue. There's been a drop in the offerings, which means there's a little reluctance in continuing outreach and missions activities. So we need to, work that back up. We wanted to zoom in these missionaries that we are supporting so that even now they can actually be part of the prayer meeting or the Bible study so that, there's that contact that is not lost. So in our discussion, we recognize that insurance could play a role in this. How do we show our due diligence? So we wrote out a policy, actually. We called it when we come together again. And so in that we asked those questions about the kids. We recognize managing kids would be probably one of the biggest challenge.
Well, let me add just one quick element on the offering. We chose to have we have a worship leader for the communion part, and he will pray for the bread and for the cup. But we also have them pray for the offering. Even though we're not taking an offering, they pray for the offering, and frankly, our giving has not gone down.
Excellent.
So Bob, for the sake of our listeners, if you pray for the offering, but you don't take an offering, how do people do their offerings?
You would explain at that point, here's the way you can give online, or you can mail your check to the church. The other thing which I didn't mention that's concern for us is, do you keep the church building open during the week? What about your staff and them being in the building, people coming to ask for benevolence? We really need to be careful, in my mind, to protect our secretarial staff people, that they are not vulnerable in some way.
And just on the offering thing, you would also have a place there at the church where people can put it as well. You just don't pass it around, right?
That's
okay.
right.
Okay, good. I might just add a few other practical things, like having a lot of hand disinfectant stations. I would also think that whoever's up front is leading by example. I don't know how it is in other parts of the world, but here in North America, they're encouraged not, if you're coughing, don't cough into your hand like that, but to cough into the inside of your elbow. Doing a number of things that just show people you're leading by example in such simple things like that. Asking people, just reinforcing, if you have a cough or a cold, a sniffle, please stay at home. I know you feel like going and you don't want to miss, but out of the abundance of agape love for other people, don't come and spread it, even if you don't think it's serious. What do you think about wearing face masks? Here in North America, in a lot of cities, it's becoming mandatory. In California, you can't go anywhere without a face mask or you'll be fined. But what this brings up is here I'm in Colorado right now as we're talking, and I notice when you go to the stores, some people are wearing a mask and some are not. And in the church, you're probably going to have a similar thing, unless you make a rule that everybody has to wear a mask. There will be some that just will not for some reason, and others will wear it, if I could say, religiously. How do you address that in your church? Do you make it a rule that everybody does it?
Chuck, I don't think you can make it a rule. It's going to cause real problems. And I've already talked to two people that are highly claustrophobic. They literally will not wear a mask. That might be hard to understand, but when you deal with a person like that, they say, no, I cannot put that on my face. And they're prepared to go to jail for it even. That's not a joke. So you can have recommendations, but certainly you can say, please stand back. Let's consider one another. And if you're talking and if you're willing, you should really wear a mask to protect the other person.
Amen. Amen. Any other thoughts on that?
Well, I think there are people who, if there are a substantial number of people without masks, there are people who won't come.
Yeah.
And that's just reality. But the other thing for us in Dallas is you've got the president and the national standards, you've got the governor and the state standards, and you've got a county judge who's got his standards. And so it's not just a matter of following the law. It's a matter of which law are you going to follow.
And so this may become an opportunity for church leaders to be able to address those kinds of strong differences of opinion, especially when you feel it's going to hurt me if you don't do something the way I think you should do it.
Well, Chuck, yeah, I'll tell you the big one, and Bob mentioned it in the beginning, but this whole vaccine, there's going to be strong feelings on both sides of this, and that's going to be a shepherding question, no question. We're going to have to figure out how to lead our flock through vaccine or no vaccine. That's going to be a big one. I can guarantee it.
For the sake of our listeners around the world, in North America, in some circles, there's some people that are very adamantly opposed to vaccinations, and other people are militant about everybody being forced to have it. And so as Christians, we all have our different viewpoints. Is it strictly medicine? Is it an imposition on freedoms and that sort of thing? It's a real issue here in North America. So it may be different issues related to that in other places, but good point, Dave. Appreciate that. Well, listen, we've been talking for quite a while. Let me just ask any special consideration for the nursery work, youth meetings, like any advice you have on things to consider other than what we've already addressed?
Well, we've been doing our youth meetings by Zoom, and we encourage people to use phone calls, but we haven't had them meet yet together because many of the young people just laugh at all of this. They're immune, they think, and maybe they have a little better resistance, but we now know that teenagers can get this too. So the Zoom meetings have worked, lots of good phone calls, following up. Let's get one another to minister to one another. Encourage people to say, hey, and I said this today to a person, get on the phone, start calling people. Each of our elders in our church are to be calling one person a day, all of us, and over a period of time, we can cover everybody.
If people are already experiencing Zoom, then stepping it up from a phone call to being a Zoom conversation. It's not the same as in person, but it is a little more personable. So
I did a thing on Paul and social distancing, and my attack was nobody was better social distancing than Paul, whether it was being in prison or whether it was only staying a short while in a town. And yet here he can write to Rome, and he can talk about particular groups and particular people. And you're talking about, it takes weeks or maybe longer to reach a church with a letter. And so with our technology, we have no excuse for not staying in close touch with people. And maybe this pandemic is one of the things that pushes the technology piece a little harder.
Well, listen, we covered a lot of ground. I don't pretend to think that this is exhaustive or exclusive, but hopefully this will stir up people who listen to this, that they may come up with your own creative ideas. But as we go forward, it's not just a matter of going back to church as usual. We've been changed. The church has been changed, and some of that has been good change. And so we need to capitalize it and hit the ground running and not just go back into church as usual. So my prayer, and I can speak on behalf of you guys, that we wanted to do this as a way of just ministering to church assembly leaders around the world. Some of what we've said may not be specifically fit to your circumstances, but if you're a leader of God's people, you're used to adapting and using what's there to be of benefit and service to God's people. So thank you all for joining me. Thank you, Alex, Bob, Viji, Dave, and Kevin. And if anybody has any questions that's listening to this, please send us an email at biblicaeldership@gmail.com, and we'd be glad to interact with you as much as we can. Thank you so much for joining us, and the Lord bless you.